Henry and Catherine did their duty to the Tudor dynasty. And just months into their marriage, Catherine became pregnant. The royal couple were happier than ever. But on January the 31st, 1510, their happiness turned to sorrow when their baby was stillborn at nearly 8 months. Henry was just as distraught, but he didn't blame his wife. In fact, he was very gentle and supportive. And the stillbirth was kept a closely guarded secret. Apart from the royal couple, only 4 people knew about it. And Catherine remained in confinement, hidden away from the rest of the court, until she was pregnant again. Which didn't take very long. On New Year's Eve 1510, the Queen went into labour.
All Catherine's hopes rested on giving Henry a healthy son and heir. She blamed herself for losing the first child, and she felt she couldn't afford to fail again. At 1:30 a.m. on New Year's Day, Catherine gave birth. To her utter delight, it was a boy.
Precious boy.
Just a year and a half into his marriage, and already he had a son. He was the triumphant, virile, ultra-masculine king. Henry was probably more in love with Catherine at that moment than at any other time in their marriage. He had lived up to his father's expectations.
I have a son. A son. I will call you Henry.
But Henry and Catherine's happiness was not to last.
Less than 8 weeks after his birth, Henry and Catherine's precious son died. In the 4 years Henry and Catherine had been married, they suffered the loss of 2 babies. Then in late 1513, another son tragically died just hours after his birth. The following autumn, another boy was born, but he also died. This was now a cycle of grief.
Henry was growing more and more desperate. The throne his father had fought for and won was in jeopardy. The strain weighed heavily on the young king. But then, in February 1516, Catherine went into labour for the 5th time. Henry was probably terrified that once again the baby would not survive.
Fortunately, on the 18th of February, a healthy child was born.
News of the birth was immediately sent to Henry. But it wasn't the news he wanted to hear. His baby was a girl.
If it's a daughter this time, boys will follow. We're still young. Call her Mary.
Henry tried to swallow his disappointment, but the truth was he needed a boy. Only 3 women had attempted to rule England as queen, and in each case it had ended in civil war. The Tudor dynasty was 2 generations old. Without a son, it wouldn't make it to a 3rd. So a princess simply wasn't good enough.
Over the next 9 years, Catherine conceived only once more. Again, a girl. Sadly, she too died at birth. Catherine was now in her late 30s and would not conceive again. To her horror, Henry did father a son with his mistress, one of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting.
Catherine had failed to give him the son he desperately needed. Her last pregnancy had been 4 years earlier. There were no signs of any more. The Tudors were in danger of disappearing. Henry kept up appearances, but in truth, his heart had left the marriage. He was looking for a way out. Around 1526, Henry found it. His gaze fell on a young woman in court. Another of Catherine's ladies-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn.
Catherine had seen it all before. Henry wasn't the great womanizer we've been led to believe, but he had had 2 short-lived affairs. Catherine knew of his attraction to Anne and probably thought that he would have his way and then grow bored and move on. But this time, things were different.
Anne was intelligent, charming and sophisticated. She'd learnt elegant manners and the latest fashions in the glittering courts of the Archduchess of Austria and the Queen of France.
Once Henry noticed her, he became absolutely obsessed. Henry was genuinely very pious and a keen student of scripture, so naturally he turned to the Bible to help him understand the reasons for the failure of his marriage and to justify trying to wriggle out of it. While studying his Bible, Henry found a passage that seemed to have been written specifically for him. This is the passage. It's from Leviticus chapter 20, verse 21. It says, "And if a man shall take his brother's wife, it is an unclean thing. He hath uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless." To Henry, this was the proof that his marriage to Catherine wasn't just coming to an end. It had been illegal right from the start. Henry was now convinced that God was on his side, so he asked the Pope to annul his marriage. Even without the benefit of hindsight, this was a pretty extraordinary decision. So why did Henry do it? Well, certainly he was smitten with Anne Boleyn, and he genuinely doubted the validity of his marriage. But I think there was something more fundamental at work. The truth was, Henry had grown up. 17 years into his reign, he had power, he had experience. Now, much of this he'd learned from Catherine, but he didn't need a teacher anymore. He needed a son. So whatever their past, whatever love they'd shared, Catherine had to go.
Your Majesty.
In June 1527, Henry decided to tell Catherine that he believed their marriage was against God's law.
Catherine, my conscience has been troubling me.
Sire?
It is the opinion of many theologians that we have been in mortal sin all the years we've lived together.
Henry, what are you saying?
I have decided, for the sake of both our souls, that we should separate from both bed and board. I would like you to choose somewhere to retire.
No.
Catherine, this is for the best.